back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side girl, and today we're talking about my August reading wrap-up. So, sorry, I'm doing one wrap-up this time instead of two because I only read one book in August physically. So, there's that. We'll get into why in a second. I did listen to 6 audiobooks, so pretty typical audiobook month for me, but physically I only read one book. Technically, like, completed it, so I didn't want to do a whole separate video on this one book because I didn't even like it that much. So that being said, combining this into one wrap-up, which is going to drive me crazy because I have 2 wrap-ups for every single month except for August. So yeah, we're just gonna get into it. So part of the reason I only read one book this month, unfortunately, even though I had a readathon at the end of the month, which was called Catch-Up-a-thon, where you get caught up on all the books that you haven't finished, was for a few reasons. One, just this year in general, I have been not physically reading as much. It's getting a little bit better, but I don't know if it's just the books I'm picking up. I haven't been reading as much before bed like I've talked about in other wrap-ups. And we've been busier and I've been gardening and there's just been a lot of other things. The main reason I didn't read more than one book this month is because I technically started like 3 or 4 other books and didn't finish them for various reasons. I didn't DNF them, but I was basically getting ready to start a readathon or kind of wanted to jump around into something else. And so I have like over halfway through, almost all the way done with some of them. So I technically would have read like 4 books this month, if you count all those half books that I didn't finish, but this is the only one I completed, so it's the one we're going to talk about. So for the catch-up-a-thon, I read Deep Betrayal by Anne Greenwood Brown. This is the 2nd book in the Lies Beneath series. I was very excited to get to this one, and this is the only physical book I wound up finishing. This is a mermaid series about Calder White and his sisters. Technically Calder is a merman and they're the type of mer creatures that can go in any kind of body of water and change. It's actually set on Lake Michigan. Their mom fell in love with a human and he left her or something, and she cursed him and his children, and so his mom has died, and so him and his sisters are going to fulfill this curse. So I can't say too much about this one, obviously, because it's the sequel. I read Lies Beneath last year physically, and then I listened to it on audiobook this year. I really liked it a lot more on audiobook this year than I did physically reading it. It was kind of iffy. But then I physically read this one and I kind of had iffy feelings again. Like, it wasn't hard to read, but I was just, I don't know. Anne's characters in this series are very unlikable, and this has got a different perspective. We get the love interest perspective in here, and I just didn't like her. And so they're just bratty teenagers, and they're obnoxious, and they're rude, and they're mean to each other, and there's bullying and stuff. And so I liked like the mermaidy stuff, and there was like curses and things, but this kind of took like a left turn, and like really weird stuff was happening with like mermaid lore that just kind of came out of nowhere in the middle of the book. Like, I'm fine with like radical, you know, magical things, but there was just this one section that I just kind of felt was like unnecessary. So I'm debating on reading the 3rd book. I think I'm going to start it, and if I get that feeling where I'm just kind of like meh, then I might unhaul the whole series. So we'll just have to see how that goes, because I just like so many other mermaid books more, and so far this is not one of my favorites, but I did give it 3 stars. For audiobooks, I had an actual excellent month. I wound up listening to 4 new releases, which is amazing. I usually read 1 or 2, and I like to do a lot of new releases via audiobook. The reason why is because I don't own them. It's harder for me to physically find them at the used bookstores and things like that. And so I do a lot of my new releases via audiobook if the narrator is good. So probably my most exciting, honestly, like this is the only debut book that I was like so excited for, was House of Salt and Sorrow by Erin A. Craig, narrated by Tavia Gilbert. This is one that I kind of found on my own before any hype was going on about it. I have it in my most anticipated releases video that I put out in January. I went and looked at all the new releases coming out and things that kind of popped out at me. I researched, and so this one is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling set on an island with a lot of ocean and myth and lore. Like, it had mermaid vibes. It's not a mermaid book, but it has that oceany aspects. Like, the island believes in like these water gods, and it's just so good. So our main character in this one's sisters keep dying and she doesn't know why, and it's very sad. And so she's kind of got this mystery going on, and then they have that 12 dancing princesses sneaking off thing, and of course there's like romance in here. But I love 12 dancing princesses retellings. They're almost my favorite retellings because I just love the whole like sneaking off, and then like there's all this magical stuff that happens when they sneak off and do their dancing thing. And if you guys aren't familiar with the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, then you need to read it because it's really short. It's one of my all-time favorites. But I just love sisterly bonds, and usually there's something that happens with the mom, and so they have their dad, and he can be like nice or he can be like controlling, and the romance in here was pretty good. I didn't love Tavia's narration, but it was decent, and I liked the story so much that I just really enjoyed it. I found it a lot of fun, and the cover is beautiful, and I was just so excited that this lived up to my expectations. It's not a mermaid book, like I said, but it might as well be in my opinion, so I wound up giving this one 4 stars. Then I re-listened to Sea Witch by Sarah Henning on audiobook, narrated by Billie Fulford Brown, because I was preparing for Sea Witch Rising, which is the second book. So, read this one last year via audiobook and listened to it again via audiobook this year. So this is a Little Mermaid retelling, but it's like the backstory of Ursula. So this has a lot less to do with like the ocean, and you spend a lot less time like underwater than a lot of the other mermaid books that I like. It's mostly set on land. There are 2 friends and there's a mystery. There are 2 princes and there's like mermaid mystery and witchy mystery. They're hanging out in a castle a lot of the time, and it's got that oceany, islandy type setting, and I loved it. Despite it not being as much like underwater and in the ocean as I expected, because you know, it's a Little Mermaid retelling. So it's basically a Ursula backstory, but it's really got a lot more meat to it than that, and the characters have a lot of heart, and you get a lot of in-depth information about them. So I think if you go into this with the right mindset, you're gonna love it. I just know a lot of people that really like it. It's getting hyped up more now than I did last year, but I like saying its praises. Something funny happened this year. I really, really love Elizabeth Knoweldon as a narrator, and I kept saying that she narrated Sea Witch, and she did not. Billie Fulford Brown did, and I think I also said that she narrated House of Furies, and she did not. I might have even got it wrong here in the little title. It was Billie Fulford Brown, who I do really, really love. I love Elizabeth Knoweldon a little bit more, but I really like Billie Fulford Brown's narration. So I was super excited to find out that she narrates with Billie Fulford Brown for Sea Witch Rising, which is book 2. They narrate together, and I was just like, all my dreams came true. I get a second book, I get 2 of my favorite narrators, and it's just so awesome. So this is after the math of the whole Sea Witch story, and this basically is a little bit of more of a Little Mermaid retelling. It has a lot in there though, and there's a lot of things that are changed around. It's completely separate almost from this book, for one of the main characters is still in here. It definitely wasn't necessary. Like, this one is a good standalone, but I loved it just because I love Little Mermaids and ocean retellings. And if you wanted more of those like underwater scenes and like the magic and the sisters and the, you know, the Ocean King and like all that kind of stuff, then this is your this is your book. The love story is really fun too, and I just thought it was really, really, really enjoyable, and I just love this series as a whole. It kind of left room for another book, so we'll see what happens there. Again, kind of a pretty satisfying ending, but we'll see if there is a third book, but I gave this one 4 stars as well. Then I listened to Emily Winsnap and the Sirens Secret. This is book 4 in the Emily Winsnap series by Liz Kessler. I've been raving about this for a long time. This is a middle grade mermaid series that is just so charming. It is narrated by Finty Williams, who is amazing. All of the narrators this month were so good. I just love a good like British female narrator. Oh, so good. I love her so much. She's so adorable and so good at narrating this middle grade series. I particularly liked this one because there were sirens mixed in with the mermaids. It's a chapter series. Each story has its own like full separate story, so I really like it. If you like middle grade books or if you just love mermaids, I think you're gonna love it, especially on audiobook, but it definitely is like a middle grade series and it has middle grade tones and tendencies. But I so enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. I actually wound up DNFing 2 audiobooks this month, and I haven't done a DNF on an audiobook in a long time, so One of those was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and I'm so sad about it. I can't remember the narrator's name. I'll put him right here. He just was not for me. Jeff and I tried to listen to them. I have physically read this first book, and I was like, let's just listen to all the Percy Jackson books together. And we made it about 2 hours in, which was kind of brutal for me. I just kept going because Jeff was like, no, it's fine, because he really liked the story. But I just couldn't do it. This is, of course, a middle grade series, but he was reading it like they were children. I just did not enjoy his narration style at all in this particular series. I don't know. I like this book, so it wasn't the book, it was just the narration. So I did wind up DNFing this one. I will physically read this again because I want to continue on with the series, but unfortunately not to the audiobook. I also DNF'd Outpost by Anna Guire, and I'm actually going to unhaul the last book in the series because it's the only one that I own. Kind of dystopian, kind of post-apocalyptic series. It's not a bad series, but nothing really stands out, and I really, again, did not like the narrator. To say anything bad, she didn't do a bad job. I've listened to so many great narrators that when one is not really fitting with the story for me, I just move on. I did listen again to about 2 hours of this, and I just found out that I just didn't really care. It could have been the narrator, but the first book was really just like a 3-star read, and I was like, you know, I have some other dystopian series. I do like dystopian books, so I'll just, you know, stick with those, and I'm probably going to unhaul the last book. Then I wound up listening to Four Dead Queens by Astrid Schultz. This one is narrated by Elizabeth Knoweldon and another narrator that will be right here for you guys to see. And so this one was so hilarious to me. I was debating on listening to it or reading it, and I like to physically read new releases. So this came out in January or February, and I was able to find it at a used bookstore, which is really rare for me. So I like to physically read new releases because I usually pay more for them or somebody gives them to me. And so I had my idea of this book all wrong, and it messed me up. I thought that this was going to be kind of more like Three Dark Crowns, and also I thought it was a retelling of King Lear, but I was getting it mixed up with the Queens of Innis Lear, which is an adult, like, King Lear retelling. This is not that. And so I was totally thrown off when this is set in kingdoms, but it's kind of in the future, and there are sci-fi elements to this. And so certain quadrants have these like sci-fi technology elements, and then they also have like this old monarchy of queens, and they rule these different quadrants, and there are all these sci-fi things happening. I was just like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna like this. So I switched to audiobook because I did physically own it, and I was like, if I don't like it, I'll just trade it, but I need to figure it out while it's still popular. And so I wound up listening to an audiobook, and I wound up loving it so much. I actually thought it was kind of genius. I really loved the narrations. Of course, Elizabeth Knoweldon is my favorite, and I just thought it was so much fun, and it was unlike anything I've ever read because it mixed those like old worldy queendom monarchy type vibes with like these weird sci-fi elements of like popping into people's pasts and seeing the future and just like all kinds of crazy things, skin suits and stuff. So I don't really know how to explain this book, but I really loved it, and I thought the audiobook was exceptionally good, so I wound up giving this one 4 stars. And then lastly, for the hike-a-thon, I finished it kind of in September a little bit, but I read most of it in August, was Sherwood by Megan Spooner. This is a Robin Hood kind of reimagined. So this is about Maid Marian, and Robin Hood has died. She is grieving, and she's very upset because they were going to get married and she was in love, and now she's going to have to marry somebody else and try and, you know, and do all these things, and she has all this attachment to like Sherwood and like the area that she's in, and wants to like protect the people, but she's not going to marry Robin of Locksley anymore, and so she just doesn't know what to do. And then just this whole adventure with like the Robin Hood themes ensues, and is just turning Robin Hood's original story on its head in such an amazing way. I love the final love story that wound up happening. It totally took me by surprise. I was not expecting it. I saw it going one way and something else happened. Just the elements in here were so beautiful. Megan Spooner is such an amazing writer. She's so good at doing retellings, and I just thought this one especially was like so feminist in the best way possible and so great, and I just love the settings and everything like that. This one was narrated by Fiona Hardingham. Love her now too. She is up there with like Elizabeth Knoweldon and Billie Fulford Brown. It's just like a good British narrator, and I just thought it was amazing, and this flew by so quickly. When I was reading it and listening to it, it was like watching a movie, and I just loved it. I can't believe I put it off for this long. I loved Hunted just as much, and I physically read that one. So Megan Spooner is officially now one of my all-time favorite writers, and I can't wait to try some of her sci-fi stuff to see if I have that same vibe or if I just like the old-timey retellings that she does. But this one is excellent, guys. I gave it 5 stars. It just made me feel like warm and fuzzy and just happy. It just made me feel really happy, and that was the same thing The Hunted did. So excellent. I heard she's got like some kind of cool retelling coming out next year that I'm really jazzed to talk about more later. So gave this one 5 stars. Okay, you guys, that was all that I read and listened to for the month of August. So far in September, things are going okay. I had the hike-a-thon for this first week, and I'm really sorry that this video is coming up super late. We just had a crazy busy month, and I had a lot of like readathons back to back. So I hope you guys are having a great reading month so far. Let me know if you guys read anything you loved in August, if you want to pick up any of these now that you've heard me talk about them, and I'll see you guys next time on The Right Side.